Hello and welcome to the Astro Garden, a place for astrologers to chat all things astro. I'm your host Janessa of By Jove Astrology. Thanks for tuning in. All right, welcome to another episode of the Astro Garden. Today I have my friend Olivia here with us. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here today. Olivia is actually someone who is local to me in Minnesota. We're recording via the interwebs because of convenience, but she's like my first astro friend that I've gotten to meet in person. So thank you for being that for me.
Exciting.
Yeah. So do you want to take a minute to just introduce yourself and a little bit about you?
Yeah. So my name's Olivia. I'm in St. Paul on Dakota land. I run Astro Abolitionist on Instagram, which is very exciting. And people always have lots of questions about how does abolition tie into astrology? And I hope we can get into that today. But yeah, I'm coming up on 2 years as a practicing astrologer next month, which is crazy to think about. It feels like it just started, but also that I've been doing it for lifetimes. So time is always interesting when it comes to astrology. Just thinking about like the scope of the cosmos and my little blip in here. But yeah, that's how I'd introduce myself.
Nice. Well, let's get right into the abolitionist piece of your work. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah. So I really came into astrology um, after the whole like uprising here in Minnesota. And I was thinking a lot about abolition, as I think we all were. There were a lot of calls for abolishing the police and just like thinking broader about abolition in general. And so as I was entering my like astrological journey, that was already top of mind. And the first time I saw my chart and the first time my teacher really like offered some insight into my chart, there was a lot of like themes of liberation and themes of supporting people in discovering their own liberation. And I was like, well, I think this is the medium for that. The chart. It really like awakened something within me, like that I didn't know was dormant, and all of a sudden it was stirring. And so I really connect abolition to astrology through it being a tool to access like what does the universe want from you? What kind of pact did you make to come into this world and inhabit a body? And how can your birth chart sort of like point us in the direction that you really have like natural gifts to share that can contribute to all of us becoming our freest selves? And so I call my birth chart readings like liberated birth chart readings, and that we're really looking for like an on ramp to what like actions are you taking in your lifetime while you're here that can really support us in breaking down some of these really contrived barriers and like do what the universe wants us to do, which is like restore balance and remember that we're all connected and that we're all interdependent. So that's how I see it tying in.
That's really beautiful. I love that. Yeah, that word, that liberation word is such a good one, I think, for astrology. I I've had a similar experience, I think, and I don't know that I would have chosen that like abolition for it, but like it really is such a key part of like why I'm interested in astrology too, of like, oh, there's so much freedom in like knowing yourself and knowing what is there for you, or like a little piece of like what your like fate might be,
Yes,
or
yes.
like some people, I think it can be really off-putting, the idea of like fate versus free will. And I think the more I've studied astrology, the more I've come to find that I think just knowing what I know with astrology is like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that is really fated. Um, but for me, that's been so liberating because it is like, oh, I don't maybe have as much control as I thought I did.
Mhm.
And that can feel like the opposite to some people I know, but
Yeah.
for me, that's been like the key to doing so much stuff since discovering it, I guess. But
Yes. Yes.
yeah, cool. I'm curious about how you came to astrology. Like, who were your first like teachers or books, or like what hooked you, I guess?
Yeah. So I've always really resonated with my sun sign. I'm a Pisces. And so growing up reading like People magazine and Cosmo and like all those horoscopes, I was always very into the Pisces. Like
Yeah,
that would be something that people knew about me
yeah.
growing up is, oh, she's a Pisces. Um, and then I don't think I actually saw a birth chart until I saw mine in my coursework. I came into a community ed class run by Betty Edwards of Sassafras Astrology over in Minneapolis. And I started that late October 2021. And it was like not even 2 weeks after my stepdad had passed away from cancer, which was a really huge journey. It was, he was diagnosed in August with brain, lung, and bone cancer, and then passed away in October. So it was very quick.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you. And it was something where my mom, my sister, and I were taking care of him. And through that process of just like really coming to terms with death, it was the first time that I had really like spent significant time with someone as they were dying. And then being with him as he passed away, that the grief, it felt like the grief just like opened a portal inside me. Like it was so intense and so um just like profound. Like all of a sudden I felt like I was having all of this information and knowledge and like ways of knowing streaming into me that I don't even know how I made it to this astrology class. Like I was really like going to work, leaving work, going home and just sleeping. I just really was like recovering some rest in that first couple of weeks after he passed. And but somehow I found myself at South High School in this community ed class. And when Betty showed me my chart, it was like this like ancient technology that I was like, oh my gosh, I know this. Like I felt like I recognized it. And even like as we continued the course, I just kept having that feeling of this is something I've already known in like past life or my ancestry. I'm not sure, but it felt like I was recovering a language that I'd already known and had lost. And that was so exciting,
Mhm.
just to feel really at home with this like new to me technology. And like the more and more I kept learning, the more and more I had that feeling. And it really felt like this is a natural medium for me to express like my little Pisces baby self, like was just experiencing all of this energy and like noticing all of these things. And it felt like sometimes I noticed this too with like the Pisces memes. It's like, am I going crazy? Like just noticing all the like oneness in the world and all of that, those sort of themes. But really astrology gave me like some sort of like way to organize all of that. Like, oh, I can kind of like point to that energy within this chart and say, oh, okay, that's my Gemini Mars. Like, and have some kind of like structure for all of that. Um, just felt so good and still feels so good. Um, yeah, yeah. It's really been like so supportive for me in, like you said, like discovering who I am and really supporting me and like giving language to all of that stuff. Like all of this stuff that I cannot see and I cannot touch, but I know is there, and having some language to share it
Mhm.
has been incredible. Yeah.
That's really, really profound. Like there is so much there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm finding, the more and more people I talk to about astrology, that there always is like uh, this like initiation or like this
Mhm.
event or something that like happens where um yeah, it like it feels like it kind of finds you or something, and
Yeah.
it really need it, and it's all, it happens in all different ways, right? But
Yes.
it's really cool. Like I think that's a big part of why I'm doing this this series too, is just like hearing those stories and like how other people like find it, because it's so interesting and it's usually a really big story behind it.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for sharing that. That's unfortunately a lot of the times it is like something really profoundly negative or like difficult. And yeah, there's something about that experience too that really is like helpful, I think, for others to hear, for myself to hear too, of like everybody has something like this that has happened to them. And there's different scales and there's differences, obviously, between everyone's experience. But um, it feels really good to know that like this is just a part of being human. And
Yes.
um, yeah, it's comforting. Yeah. Um, a lot there. What? Oh, the part about I'm so interested in too, like, and I've definitely felt that way with like the like where it's like a remembering or like a something that you it feels so familiar to you. I've
Mhm.
definitely experienced that too with astrology, and it's like signing up for classes and stuff. I felt like okay, I've studied a lot of my own, and but do I really know this? And then you get to the class and it's like, yeah, okay, it is what I thought. Maybe
Yeah.
part of yeah, maybe part of that's like imposter syndrome, but also like no, it is like this intuitive thing that I think if you're becoming an astrologer, like there maybe it is a past life thing, or maybe it is just like maybe it's so intuitive because it's like this tool that has been around just for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious about like your philosophy, like of how it might work, or like if you were explaining how astrology works to like a new client who's never had like a reading before, like how do you kind of approach that?
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I am pretty like woo woo when it comes to astrology. Like sometimes people are like, I want like a technical reading. Like I can do that for sure. But what if we like really dove in, like this is a little blueprint from the universe? Because I really believe like we were all sent in here to restore some kind of balance, and we're all doing it differently and at different scales, different capacities, but that's why we're here. And I really feel that. And I feel like when I look at a birth chart, it just shows me all these little like different on ramps to getting there. And then I try to just like see what's coming up for the client. And usually, like I'm looking at the chart and they're talking about something like, oh, there that is.
Mhm.
Let's dive in right there. And really, it's like, how can we remember this pact we made? Because we come here and we forget everything. We have to go through all the like trials and tribulations of being a human being and growing in this world. And how can we look at the chart and really find like, oh yeah, that kind of like moment of like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing here. I feel like there's so much that we have lost the plot. And astrology, I feel like, is this way of like pointing back to like what is actually happening. Like to me, that's like a way to really like feel into reality. Like these are the energies that play, and these are the ways that the planets are like exerting energy on each other and really like talking to each other, communicating across time and space, within you, within like this one like human body. And so how can we connect that to this reality that we do live in? Like we do have to move in the world as it is now. So really trying to like bridge the two. That's what I see, like astrology is like this little bridge that like once we learn like how to walk it, we're sort of like doing that work of restoring balance, but like very, very personally. It's very personal and very collective. And like talking about the different planets in that too, like the more personal planets and then those outer planets that are working more in like generational capacities. Does that answer your question? I forgot what your question was.
Yeah, I think so. Or yeah. No, there's a lot there too. Yeah, so I'm curious if you, because I have mainly studied traditional, like Western Hellenistic astrology.
Yeah.
And so there are it's very similar in a lot of ways, I think, to everything you're saying, but there's also some like nuanced differences.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them being more like about the psychological piece, which I feel like is the modern style versus like the more like faded like view that like Western astrology has taken. But yeah, so I'm curious then like what you have studied and like what you if you have any like thoughts about those nuances differences or like do you yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this question,
Yeah,
but
no, I got you. So I feel like the psychological stuff does come up more like in the reading. And for me, it's really like based on whatever vibe we're creating in like that container of a reading that becomes so like intimate.
yeah,
Uh,
totally.
yes. And like really how this sort of medium allows people to be really vulnerable. I feel like it's so like there's enough distance between us and the chart that the vulnerability comes out and like it's not so personal. People do come in thinking like, I know this is not a therapy session, but and they'll like unload all of this stuff. And I'm like, I can see that in here. And I can see that in like what the universe has for you here. And like you're right, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm uh, an astrologer. I'm just a lady, just a lady looking at your chart.
Yeah.
But that like psyche stuff does definitely come up while I'm reading.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's not something that I necessarily have studied or go into a reading with that top of mind. I have studied spiritual astrology. I love the book Spiritual Astrology by Jan Spiller and Karen McCoy. It's my favorite book. My teacher gifted it to me. And it goes through like each planet and each sign and house, but it also has a section at the back that's all about your prenatal solar and lunar eclipses and what that can show you in terms of like what you have to teach while you're here and what you have to learn while you're here. And that's really the framework that I operate out of, is that there's something here for you to like bestow upon us. There's some kind of gift or knowledge that only you carry, that we're finding a way for you to express that while you're here and like share that with all of us. And there's some lesson here, that your soul is like yearning to learn, that there's something that you need to sort of engage with outside of yourself and sort of integrate in order to move on, in order to really like operate at full capacity while you're here.
Nice. That's really cool. I love how clear you kind of are on that, like on the goal or something of a reading too, of like, yeah, some kind of like outcome or place that you're trying to get them to. I feel like for me still in my readings, it's a little bit more like, let's see what comes up today. And I'm sure it's like that too.
Yes.
You never know what you're gonna get, but like I think that's really cool and something I'm gonna take away from this of like, okay, what is the end goal of a reading and like what, something just to reflect more on, I guess. But
yeah, it was interesting. I do a lot of like mini readings where I've never met the person, I've never seen the chart, and they just come in and it's like a little 15-minute let's see what's happening, like what's the big theme that's going on right now. And it's me in the back lounge and then another person up at the front who's like running the store and taking people in and kind of directing them to me. And she said, like, I send people back there and then they come out and there's this like relief all over their face of having been really like encountered, honestly. Like just really looking for some like authentic connection within the reading. That's my biggest goal, is that after coming in and having a reading with me, that you feel like you've been seen.
right.
And really seen as like this really generative being, like this person who's like inhabiting a body, but also that you're so much more than that. Yeah, I thought that was really cool how I came out and she's like, everybody comes out and they're just like, wow, thank you. Some rest. Like, oh, that's great. Then I go home and rest.
Right. That's really cool. Something you said about your approach being like very woo. I'm curious about, and I've talked to some others about this too, about like what is it like for you, like calling yourself an astrologer or introducing yourself that way, or do you introduce yourself that way, or how do you share that and how does it go for you?
Yeah, at first I was so tentative. Just because there are all these like certification courses and people who are like, I've been studying for 10 years and now I'm an astrologer. I'm like, I've been studying for like 3 years and I just kind of jumped in there. And definitely, like you said earlier, that imposter syndrome comes up where you're like, am I an astrologer? And the more and more that I engage with it and read people's charts and I've just gotten such a flood of positive feedback of people really supporting me and lifting me up and feeling that connection. I'm like, it would be almost a disservice not to call myself an astrologer. Like, it would be kind of rude to
Yeah.
be doing all of this. Be like, no, but I'm not an astrologer.
Yeah.
So I do introduce myself as an astrologer. The response is typically really positive. People are usually like, look at my Channy app, like tell me about myself. People, have generally just been really positive and really like excited. I feel like astrology is really growing in terms of people wanting to really understand it, not just as this sort of like surface level personality thing, but as something that can connect them to themselves deeper. And so that's sort of the feedback that I've gotten on that. I will say that with like older generations, it's definitely met with more like skepticism. Totally understandable.
Mhm.
I'm sure there are some like astrologers that you should be really skeptical about.
Right.
There's like a level of discernment that you need to carry when you enter this kind of community. And so I understand being met with that. And I think the most people that I read are like millennials, maybe elder millennials, Gen X, a lot of Gen Z, which is really cool.
Yeah.
When I encountered, there's like no skepticism whatsoever. There's no like, it's just like, okay, here, and I already know this and this and this and this and this. So it seems like, yeah, the younger people are getting really into it. But then I have just like really wonderful clients who are elders, who are interested in this and have been interested in this. And like, I got my first reading in the 50s. Like, that's so cool.
That is really cool.
You've been engaging with this for like decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. I'm glad to hear that it's been positive for you. I'm still testing it out in different.
Yeah.
If it comes up, I'm not going to say I'm not, but just kind of feeling it out.
Yes. Yeah. And that's important too. Like noting the context of how you're bringing this up, because people can be really, like, I joke about, people showing me their app and stuff, but like sometimes that is really, I don't know, like invasive.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it can't, like if you're sharing that and then people like jump right in, it can feel like, ooh, hold on. Like, and, I've been working really hard on my energetic boundaries and just like supporting my nervous system and how much I can take in and how much I have to give. So yeah, noting the context is very important and very like necessary for your own health.
Yeah, I'm not here to like defend astrology or like explain it to anyone. And I think that's like a bigger thing I'm working on too, of like just myself in general. Like I don't need to do that anymore. And I never needed to, but that's a newer revelation.
Yes.
And yeah, so finding the right time and space and yeah, feeling it out for sure. I'm curious about how you do honor your energy and like, what are your practices that you use like to set those boundaries or like, I don't know, rest or restore yourself after giving a lot of readings or yeah.
Yeah, it's really something that at my first pop-up, I was in the same tent as a tarot reader, Megan from Pentacle Pursuits. She's amazing. She, like, between every reading would use like Palo Alto, and she would use sprays and candles and all this sorts of stuff. And I had always been interested in crystals. That's really how I came to work at this particular shop, We the Starborn, is that I just patronized it quite a bit. And so I have crystals that I work with. I'm holding one right now.
Oh, cool.
And they're really supportive, but it was something where she showed me like during and after, like it has to kind of be like a constant sort of upkeep. So before I offer readings, I always go to my altar. We have an ancestors altar in my home. And I just sit with the ancestors. I light a candle. I offer food and really just ask for like their energetic support. And I can really, like, even now as I'm talking about, I like feel that on my back, like them like holding me up and supporting me. Thank you. And then during, I work with crystals. I work with incense. I have one that I really love, Patchouli Forest by Satya. That's my favorite. But really just having the like ritual of burning and noting that like as the smoke rises, there's like something sort of entering within me of sort of like ancient awakening sort of happening, where I'm like, okay, here I am and I'm in it. And I really prioritize like eating and being like comfortable in what I'm wearing. I don't know if you notice this, and I want to learn more about other astrologers and magic practitioners, but like I get really, really sweaty when I'm offering readings. Like all of a sudden I'll be like, oh my God. And I'm not a sweaty person. I'm the last person in the sauna to be like dripping sweat. But during readings, like I don't know what's happening, but I get really sweaty and I get really hungry. So like the clothing that I pick is really intentional, and like having lots of snacks, like eating a big meal beforehand and offering that meal to the ancestors. And then during, I'm snacking. And then after I'm done like providing a reading, even if it's just like 1 hour reading, I make sure that I have lots of food in the fridge that's easy to eat. Because I generally like, I come home, I shower and like really release all of that excess energy down the drain. That's something that a friend taught me, was like just like letting it all go and really letting the water like restore you. It's kind of like if I had, you know, a pond or a lake or something, I'd go jump in there, but I have a shower.
Yeah.
So like letting all of that go, and then I just eat and cuddle up and chill and just like really offer gratitude that I have this gift to share, and that I'm like a vessel for all of this knowing that I get to like express with other people, and that they're receiving with such like love. And that has really supported me in like restoring, you know, my own energetic boundaries. I'm a Sag moon and a Pisces sun and a Gemini Mars. So I'm usually like all in. Like whatever like energy, you know, I have to put forth. I'm like, okay, I'm just putting it all and even more. And yeah, the tarot card Temperance has really been like top of mind for me, of like just like really pacing myself and like allowing myself to just take what's needed. And like knowing that, like figuring that out has been like the biggest challenge, I think, of setting these boundaries of like, how do I know when it's enough? But I've been leaning on my Saturn for that, just like giving me a little like structure for it, and really, yeah, like putting the boundary around like, that's enough. That's enough. You got it. That's enough.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the shower technique, especially as like a Pisces. That's
Yes.
perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, I know a lot of my astrology friends talk about like salt baths and like things like that to do when the astrology is especially gnarly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, those are really great ideas. What are your favorite crystals?
My favorite is sodalite.
Okay.
But I have had probably like 5 sodalite over the years, and I always lose them because I think it's because I always have them on me, and I'm just, you know, leave it in my pocket, or I lost one in my favorite like palm stone. I lost in Mexico, and it's like, well, I'm never gonna get that back. And it's a stone that isn't always available very easily, but it's my favorite because it's so like calming. It really just like supports me in like having an even keel and like sort of softening the edges, which my Sag moon is like, no, you don't need to just like feel all the edges. It's like, no, sometimes I need the balm of like allowing myself to just like not. So I love sodalite. I love any kind of agate. Those are really lovely and like grounding. Fluorite octahedron is one of my favorites. Wow, it is really snowing here.
Yeah, I just noticed that here too.
Okay. Yeah, fluorite octahedron is a great one. I gifted that to all my friends one Galentine's because it's like a friendship stone, and it's really like a connective stone. And so anytime I hold mine, I like remember that I'm loved, remember that I'm a part of community. Yeah, those are like my top 3.
Nice.
But I have so many.
Yeah.
So many, and it's really lovely too that is coming more into fashion, I suppose, or like becoming a little bit less like people will come to my house and see crystal, be like, oh cool, and not like, why do you have so many of those? What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that they're beautiful, and they're also like really beneficial companions to have.
Nice. What one are you holding there today?
I don't remember her name. I feel bad if anybody knows who that is. But yeah, this is my favorite palm stone right now.
Mm.
And it has, I don't know if it has little ridges from me leaving it in the dryer or if that's natural, but I feel those.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little crystal collection, but prior to all of this, me and my husband both actually were like, or still are, like avid rock collectors. So
Mm,
it was already a thing, and now it's like, oh, okay, there's even like fancier ones.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, that's really cool. I forget what I was gonna ask. There was something you said. Um, shoot. Yeah, I guess I can talk a little about what I do to ground or to
Yeah.
my some of my energetic hygiene practices are I'm not as maybe structured or like I don't spend as much time doing them. But I try to do stuff like throughout the week where I do yoga or meditation and stuff so that I'm kind of like getting out a lot of energy
Mhm.
to like be a better vessel.
Yeah.
Um, Something I've noticed is definitely like the clothing thing, like you said, like being comfortable is really key. And I think that's something that's been interesting in terms of like discovering all of this stuff, like in the past 2 years or so, has been
Mhm.
becoming more sensitive to like everything.
Yeah.
Like all of my clothes, even when I'm not readings or um it's just like a more awareness or something to my environment and to everything. So it's definitely harder. Like I don't know, I'm not everybody should do what is right for them, but for me lately I've been more like sensitive to like alcohol and like any
Mhm.
is like I've just kind of had to put like on hold for the most part. I'm not like I wouldn't call myself sober or like alcohol free, but definitely like scaled that back just because it doesn't feel good or
Yeah.
something, or
Yeah.
in most settings, unless sometimes it does, but um so that's been interesting. um and yeah, definitely lighting a candle to kind of like open it up. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you feel like you connect with the planets as like spirits or like I don't know, especially for readings, I tend to like look to Mercury and,
Mhm.
say a little, you could call it a prayer. That word sometimes feels weird, but like just asking, like, hey, can you come over and help
Yeah.
good vessel and help my messages come through and their message, what they need to hear come through. And um,
I love that.
yeah, but yeah, that definitely like the hydration and the food piece too, as like restoring your energy, prepping to be like, you know, not have these distractions or something when you're meeting with someone. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. When you brought up like just being more sensitive,
Hmm.
definitely feel that. I stopped drinking
Hmm.
and stopped a lot of things. Like I stopped wearing nail polish, just like a lot of like things where I didn't really connect it, but all of a sudden, really, I was just dropping all of this stuff, and I was like, I guess I just don't need that stuff.
Right.
Um, it's some of it is probably like, yeah, it was blocking my like ability to call in, but also some of it was like, I don't need it. Um, maybe I'm like learning how to be like a better vessel without it. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it in that context before.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, part of it is very practical, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I, I don't feel as good if I like drink a glass of wine at night, like the next day. Um, and part of that is just like being able to even notice that because I don't know that I
Yes.
prior of like, oh, I feel like slightly less today than I could be. So yeah, it's kind of comes back to like the comfort thing versus anything else, but also like how that ties into the all of it is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know the opposite stands too, or that a lot of people, or there's like, you know, different ways of accessing different states, and like the shamanic tendency to like use a substance to do that is like totally valid,
Yeah.
of interest to me too. But yeah, I think for where I'm at now, like it's a lot easier if I can just not be distracted by my meat suit.
Mhm.
um yeah, I'm curious, have you studied tarot much, or do you incorporate that into your work? I know a lot of astrologers, there's like they use some overlap, or like, I don't know, you just mentioned, yeah, your friend or acquaintance that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I don't like practice tarot. I haven't studied it much, but I do have a deck that I have befriended. It's a Game of Thrones deck. I love it. Today I used to do a daily pull like pretty religiously. And now I've noticed that I just need a little bit more space, or maybe the deck needs a little space.
Mm.
So I pull like when I feel called to pull, and today I pulled strength, which I've been pulling like pretty consistently all year, which is cool because it's a strength year.
Yeah.
If we look at like the number 8 in the deck and then in our year, I sometimes I incorporate it like I've been talking a lot about the Fool, which is the Aries card in the deck, because I think a lot of people have this idea about Aries as, and obviously we all think about it as like the warrior and like that really like impulsive, like go sign. Uh, but I'm like, we can also think about it as like this little baby, like the first sign of the zodiac, like you're just being born and like experiencing all of this and really encountering the world with this childlike innocence and wonder, and without all of the baggage and like preconceptions. And that's really where the impulsivity comes in. And I was like, sometimes that's intuition, like guiding you.
Right.
So yeah, every once in a while the deck will come into my readings, and but I really just typically think about it as like a more personal thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar with mine. Occasionally, if something is really poignant, I'll usually pull a card like before I meet with someone, or
Mhm.
I guess I don't do it super consistently, mutable things.
Yeah.
When I do, sometimes it comes up like at the topic or whatever when we're talking, and then it's like, oh, just have to tell you, like I pulled this card and
Yeah.
talk about today. Um, but yeah, I love that. And yeah, it is nice as a check-in, and I can also understand
Mhm.
taking the space to um yeah. Um I'm curious, when you meet with people, if you have any like favorite techniques or like things you do to like maybe suss out beforehand. I guess you don't always know what their chart's going to be if it's like a mini reading,
Mhm.
but yeah, you have any things like that?
Um, no. I usually do just come in like,
Yeah,
let's go.
yeah.
But then sometimes I'll notice like on a particular day. So for example, I think this was last Saturday, I was doing mini readings and Chiron just like kept coming. Like every reading I did, he was just like out there in the abyss across from all of these other planets. I was like, oh, okay, let's talk about that. And so it's always interesting when like a theme arises in a particular day where I'm like, oh, okay, I actually think there's something going on right now where I have to keep bringing this up in every reading.
Hmm.
So that's always interesting when like themes across charts come up, which I love. I love anything where I can take like a really wide breadth of like information and then like find all of the synchronicities, find all of the tie-ins, and like wrap it up with a nice little bow. That's like my favorite thing to do. My Gemini Mars is like, let's look at everything from every possible perspective and then present it as like, oh. And so, yeah, that's something that comes up a lot. And then generally I'll just like vibe with a chart. Like I really do kind of like trance out and just like look at it for a while and see like if there are any planets that are really like popping. And then I'll go from there, like start with that planet, then go to the aspects that that planet is making, and then sort of like if it snowballs from there.
Nice. I'm curious what approach too you've taken with like teaching. So like sometimes in my readings, I find myself like explaining a lot to people and teaching, like avoid it. But then part of my question is, do you do that? And then the other part of my question is, tell me everything about your class that you've taught a couple times.
Yeah, so I do that sometimes. Sometimes it seems like people are really curious about like wanting to read their own chart. And then I'm like, okay, I'm like a facilitator in this particular reading. Like, there are people who come in with like notes and notes of like, I already know all this. I'm like, cool. What do you like want to know? Like, what are you curious about? Like how things work within a chart, or how aspects work. It's usually about aspects that people are curious and like want my teaching. So there are definitely readings where that comes up. I also try to like avoid it and try to be like, okay, here's what is happening actually, like here's the information. And not avoid it, but like I try to keep it in that general arena. But yeah, sometimes people are like, I really want to know how you know that.
Right.
Okay, we could do that. And then yeah, I've taught Astro 101 twice. It's like a small group. Here's the basics. And so we'll talk about each planet, and really like what its orbit looks like, what its archetypal traits are, and like what sign it rules. And then we'll get into the signs and then talk a little bit about the houses. It's generally like people have a pretty good grasp of the signs, or at least about the signs that they inhabit, like their sun sign, their rising, their moon, that sort of thing. Or if like their family members are a particular sign, like if people come in with experiences of a sign, but it's hard to come in with experiences of a planet or experiences of a house. And so that's usually where like a lot of the teaching ends up being is like, okay, now like that we look at it in this big circle, all these little pie slices, like how does it all work together? That's definitely like the most difficult thing to teach. And I think part of it is my, like I said, like almost like natural ability to understand it, so that sometimes when people are asking me a question, I'm like, it's right there. Like, don't you see it? But it has been like a really cool experience for me too, of learning just how I can like support people in like the technical aspect, but also the intuitive aspect. I think people come for the technical and kind of leave with the intuitive and like, oh, I didn't realize that it was going to be like that. Like I thought it was really going to be like, you know, here's a list of the planets and a list of the signs and a list of the houses and like the, yeah, like really like technical piece of like how to read a chart, which is definitely a part of it. But then I'm like, it's only a 2-hour class. So I do have to like give you a little bit of the more intuitive side, the more spiritual side. And like, this is how I'm actually looking at this information and interpreting it. So it's something where I like offering it and people like taking it. But it's something where I'm like, you almost need to have, like, if you're interested in it to this extent, and like after you leave Astro 101, if you're like, oh wow, I really want to know more, then go and take like an actual course where it's weeks and weeks of learning. Because this is really like dipping your toe in. And I don't want you to think after you take Astro 101, you can go and read someone's birth chart, because maybe, but probably not.
Right. Yeah, I have faith in like the fact that once somebody starts learning astrology, that they quickly find out that there's so much more to it than they bargained for, and that it's not something you can just start doing like that. Like I do want to advocate for people like trying it out, you know, and
Yeah.
like, you know, I don't wait too long. I think some people wait years, like you said,
Mhm.
studying for 10 years before they're calling themselves an astrologer.
Mhm.
Don't do that, but like, you know, there's a lot more behind it than it seems like.
Yeah.
Maybe for memes on Instagram or um, you know, all that good stuff. But
Yes. Yeah. And it is interesting. People come in and want to talk about like all the stereotypes
right.
about each sign, and like, well, I saw a meme about this and this TikTok video. I'm like, totally. That can definitely be an expression of that particular sign. But each sign holds so much.
Yeah.
We can't even get into, if we, you know, we can't even get into every single sign in 2 hours. Can't
Right.
even cover one sign into it. So it's really like here's like sort of like the breadth of the really minute, like the details of a chart. And if you want to keep learning, keep learning. If it's something that there have been people who take Astro 101 and they're like, I do not get this and I actually kind of hate it.
Yeah.
Cool. Now you know. Now you know. And like now, you know, you can support your local astrologer and like just keep getting readings and not necessarily feel you know, pressured, or even like I think some people feel sometimes like I should know more about it because I'm interested in getting readings. It's like you can get readings and just keep getting readings. Like there are
Right.
people who just keep getting readings. For you don't have to become an astrologer to engage with astrology.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I wonder, like, for that piece of it, if it's like, I don't know, maybe this is way off, but like if it's something with capitalism too, where it's like, oh, I can't afford to keep going and getting readings, but like I better learn how to do at least some of this. So yeah, I could see that being the case for me in some, you know, in some way or shape or form to start
Yeah.
out with. It's like, oh no, I actually like need to do this for everyone. But yeah, yeah. I'm curious too, like what resources you point people to if they do want to learn more, or like if you have favorite, you mentioned the spiritual astrology book,
Mhm.
but yeah, if you have other things that you point people to and they seem very curious or want to learn more.
Yeah, I always say look at community ed, because that was such an affordable entry point for me. Like you're just talking about, like I could not afford to pay. I mean, some courses are like thousands of dollars.
Right. Yeah.
But Betty's class was $40. So it was really, really accessible. Um, so I would say, yeah, look at community ed, look at like any sort of local education classes. That's a great place to start. And then there are a lot of like really wonderful astrologers practicing on Instagram and sharing their information. I love Eighth House Astro, Christina Farella. I took her prophetic asteroids class earlier this year, and it was phenomenal. But even just like the information that she shares on her Instagram, I'm always learning from her. So I'll point people to like Instagram. You know, if you find people that you really, really vibe with, like continue and watch their stories. And if they have webinars, like just if you find someone that you vibe with, dive in there, because like you can't discount that resonance. Like there's something in there, and maybe that's like your pull to learn from that particular person, because they have the information that you need. But yeah, also books. I love books. I have too many books. But yeah, offering books. And then yeah, just finding like if you want to come back for another reading with me. I think a lot of people enter with the mini reading and they're like, wow, okay, great. I'm like, yeah. And if you want a full reading, which would be like a lot more than this, a lot deeper, we'll talk about really like your whole chart. That's always a great option. And I offer everything on a sliding scale. I feel like that's one of the most important values in this business for me, is making sure that this is accessible to everyone who wants to engage with it. And even my scale, I'm like, if my scale is like 30 to 100, I'm like, if you can pay me $10, if you cannot pay me anything, but you want to exchange something. So I've had people exchange like artwork, people exchange readings. Like if they're interested in tarot, I'll get a tarot reading, they'll get an astrology reading. Just sort of supporting each other's energies and really, yeah, like leaving it open for whoever wants to engage with it. So I always say, like, if you want another reading and you're like, but I can't pay you $100 again, you don't have to. Pay me whatever you can. And there are enough people that I read for who pay on the higher end of the scale that it's very, like, I feel supported. I feel like my energy is being exchanged efficiently. So like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. And also this money is also, it just feels like such an inefficient exchange for me sometimes. Like, and I'm like, yeah, pay me, $25 for 10 minutes. I'm like, what is that? $25, 10 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
I don't need anything to, like, I just want to like give. And I was actually reading at a birthday party a couple weeks ago, and I was not paying attention to the clock at all. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, some people were getting 30-minute readings, some people were getting 5-minute readings. And the host brought it up to me, and it was really like a really great insight for me to hear from the outside perspective of maybe those people needed that amount of your time. Like, yes, ideal, everybody wants to have like 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, everybody would get the same, but it's not even like I'm giving the same output within that structure of time for each person. It's more like, this is what your chart has to say, and here's how I'm relaying it to you. And the time kind of quits as a factor. Like, we're operating outside of time. And that's okay. It's something that we're so like used to being kind of like trapped within. Like, oh no, like I only have this many more minutes. And to have that space and to hear him say, like, you actually don't need to worry about it. Just focus on what you need to focus on, and don't worry about the clock. It's like really cool. Just a really cool way to think about it.
Yeah. Well, and on the other end of the spectrum too, you could say one sentence and it could be like everything that person needed to hear.
Yes.
Like, well, that's your reading. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be like 5 minutes. I'm like, I think that we got it.
Yeah.
Do you feel it? And they're like, yeah, we got it. I'm like, okay, great.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, why don't we wrap up by you sharing where we can find your work, what you're up to, what your offers are, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Astro Abolitionist. I will be in the Liminal Lounge at We the Starborn this Tuesday for a full moon and Scorpio meditation. These meditations are really like juicy and unctuous. It's part of the Nest series. So really thinking about setting everything down, creating a little nest for yourself, a little restful space within your day to just tune in to what the moon's doing. And the moon is our vast luminary, and it's important to check in with her. So that's an opportunity this coming week. And I'll be at We the Starborn again, offering mini readings on May 11th. It's a Saturday. And I also offer virtual readings every Friday. So if you're interested in a mini reading or a full hour reading, those are available every Friday on that same sliding scale of 30 to 100. So you can reach out to me on Instagram or email me at astroabolitionist@gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Olivia. This is so great to get to chat more with you. And I love hearing all of your insights and everything you do to be such a great astrologer. It's really cool.
Thank you, Vanessa, for all of your questions and for holding this space. This was a really cool conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we'll chat soon. And thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find more of Olivia's work at her brand new beautiful website, www.astroabolitionist.com. You can also find her on Instagram and Substack at astroabolitionist. And I highly recommend following her there to stay tuned to what kinds of events she has going on. She offers a lot of unique opportunities at a local metaphysical shop called We the Starborn. So definitely follow her there if you're interested in learning more. For more information about my work, you can find me at By Jove Astro on Instagram, at By Jove Astrology on Twitter, and the best place to find me of all is at my website, byjoveastrology.com.